Assessment can be one of the most tricky parts of MYP, but it's actually not so tricky. People are just a little bit afraid of tackling it, and hopefully this video will help you not be so afraid. First of all, we're going to review about the statement of inquiry and assessment, something hopefully you already know. The statement of inquiry are your context and concepts for the unit. So here's an example. Imagining a hopeful future can cause changes in power. This understanding is what is going to be assessed throughout a unit, both formatively and summatively. It drives every activity in the unit, or it should drive every activity in the unit. The summative task, when we refer to that, happens at the end of the learning process, and it stems from that statement of inquiry. Additionally, it uses MYP assessment criteria. Hopefully, it has a real-world feel to it and offers an appropriate level of challenge for the students that you are teaching. One model for this is the GRASP model, and I'm sure you've seen this before. The G part, the goal is to demonstrate the statement of inquiry, and then we throw it into a real-world situation by giving the students a role and an audience in a situation. Usually the role is not a student and the audience is not classmates or teacher, because we want to give it a real-world feel. Here's an example. To show that imagining a hopeful future can cause changes in power, the role would be a museum curator or a TV producer, and the audience would be the video watchers or the museum visitors. You can see here we've given a situation that involves our concepts about causes and power changes in history, and set up that it's a museum or documentary situation. So the product for the students is to create a documentary that shows the statement of inquiry in action, or to create a display board like a museum exhibit. For our standards, how they'll be judged, we're going to add in some MYP assessment criteria. This is an individuals and societies task, so these are individual and societies criteria. So you can see what's listed below. However, most of you know how to get to this point, but then you're like, what do I do with it? What does an MYP grade look like? So that's what we're going to address next. Leaving this aside, kind of taking a look at what MYP grading is all about. Is it this or is it that? How will I grade in the MYP? Will my MYP grades be letters of the alphabet? And the answer to that is no. MYP does not care about the letters of the alphabet that we often do in U.S. public schools. So it is a scale, it's an assessment scale, and that's what an MYP grade is. Will MYP grades show if students are smarter or less smart than someone else? And that answer too is no, because what MYP grades show is that students' progress at the time. So that's important to keep in mind. It's a benchmark more than like, oh, you're so super smart. It's a benchmark. So what will the MYP grades tell teachers, students, and parents? So that's where we start looking at achievement. It's an achievement level. So we're going to look at some examples here, just completely different, and look at these sand sculptures. And if I were to say, pick the best one, how do you know which is best? What do we mean by the best? Do we mean the most creative, the most complex, the easiest to build, the most lifelike, or the strongest? So criteria is what's really critical here, and that's what's critical in the MYP. We have set criteria for each subject area. So for example, with our sand sculptures rubric, we have 3 different criteria. The first criteria is creativity, and you can see 3 achievement levels: very unique and creative, or pretty common. We also have building skill. Level 3 is so easy a child could make it. Level 2, it's medium. It means with help a child could make it. And number 1 would be very hard. Only adults could make it. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, 3 is our highest criteria band and 1 is our lowest. And then we have for strength, 3 is a very solid, 2 is solid but parts may fall down easily, and 1 is fragile. It could easily fall down. Now, it's really important that we talk about clarifying what we mean here. I think in the creativity, it's pretty easy to see what they mean. We may not agree with the building skill. Like some people might think that the more difficult the building skill should be given the highest achievement level. And then here in the strength department, I think that's also pretty well clear. All right, so let's take a look at Mr. Lion here and how we would score it. Think for a second, looking at the lion for creativity, is it unique and creative, or very common? I agree. I would give it a 3. It's very creative. You don't really think of sandcastles as being an animal. And I mean, honestly, I'm so impressed with like the shape of this that we see in here. The muscles on his legs, really, really detailed. What about building skill? Is it so easy a child could do it? A child could do it with some help, or really hard only adults? And no, you can't give like a 1.5. So in this case, I'm going to give it a 2, give it benefit of the doubt that a child could do some of the things with it, like maybe gather the sand, but and maybe help with the main part of the body. So building skill, a 2. Now let's look at strength. Okay, is it solid? Is it solid, but parts of it could like fall easily? Or is it really fragile? Again, we can't give a 0.5. I'm going to go with a 2 here because a 2 really kind of puts it in the generalization, because that fur at the top, the mane, probably could crumble pretty easily. Those are really finely detailed strands. All right, let's take a look at the next castle. And it's a castle, a beautiful castle. So looking at it with creativity, is it very unique and creative, or very common? Again, can't give it 2.5, but we're going to go with a 3 here. Although it is a castle, it's a very unique sand castle. It's very different, very realistic looking. Building skill. I think most of us would agree that this is a 1. It is really difficult to build. I mean, I'm an adult and I dabbled in art and I'm not sure I could do this one. And then for strength, I think we can probably agree that this is very fragile and would fall down pretty easily. And let's look at the last one. All right. Boy, she looks happy, doesn't she? Taking a look at this one and creativity, I think we would all agree that this is pretty common. This is when we think of sandcastle at the beach, this is what we think of, the thing shaped with the buckets and all that good stuff. Building skill, this one definitely easy, something a child could easily do. And strength, you know what? It's pretty solid. It's going to be a little bit, probably stand up a little bit better than the other 2. There's nothing that's going to crumble like with the wind. Not that it can't be knocked down, but it certainly is a little bit stronger. So with that in mind, taking a look at it, if we're judging on our criteria, the child sandcastle actually comes in with a higher score than that beautiful sandcastle in the middle that I would have probably ranked as my favorite when I was looking at them. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is really subjective, but part of this comes from clarifying your rubrics and making sure you're clear on what you mean so you can be consistent. And it's really important that if you are as a department, you are consistently grading the same. And you have a rubric that does that. Rubrics are a whole nother thing, and you can see rubrics can be clarified and explained, and you can have task sheets that clarify and explain your assignment. So those are really important things to get going too. All right, so when you get started, it's important just to get started, actually. Pick an assignment to start and use an MYP rubric with the explanations. Make sure you're clear with your expectations in the rubric. Create a task sheet to help guide your students. Make sure they know what the expectations are. The more clear you are with them, the more clear you are with yourself, and you'll be consistent. And don't forget that practice is what makes you better. Keep practicing, keep using the rubrics, and I promise assessment will seem easy. Thanks for listening.